let me introduce you to the moderator of this panel, Enrique Acevedo from Univision. Gracias.
Thank you so much. Well, thanks, everyone. I know we're the only thing standing between you and happy hour this Friday afternoon, so I guess we'll make this as conversational, as dynamic as possible, so we take the most advantage out of our panelists today. Taryn Rosenkrantz, the founder and the Chief Executive Officer of New Blue Interactive. Welcome, and thanks for being here today. We also have Kenneth Pennington, the Digital Director for Bernie Sanders' 2016 presidential campaign. Thank you so much for being here, Kenneth. And Andrew Abdel Malik, the Chief Digital Strategist for OnMessage. Why don't we do an introductory round? You can talk a little bit about who you are, what you do, and then we'll start going with some of the questions from the audience, or we have a couple of conversation topics on the agenda. Go ahead.
We'll do a quick mic switch. So as he said, I'm Taryn Rosenkrantz. My company, New Blue Interactive, actually is about 4 years old. And what we do, literally, is work for every different kind of Democratic campaign. We got a Republican on the panel as well, but I only work for Democratic campaigns and progressive nonprofits. And basically what we do is really develop a social media strategy for them, as well as an overall digital communication strategy. And a lot of that still comes down to how we can raise money for them online, which predominantly can be email. And we use our social to grow our email list and try to figure out how to get them more money in the door. I would say the big buzzword that we do, and what we've been working towards for all political candidates, has been trying to find a way to kind of do it holistically so that everything digital has the same message and really can be amplified.
Kenneth.
Hi, I'm Kenneth Pennington. I'm the digital director for the Bernie Sanders campaign. And thank you. Appreciate that shout out. So I came over to the campaign after working in the senator's U.S. Senate office in D.C. and I work on a variety of things, including some of the same things that Taryn just mentioned, email and social media, websites, video, graphics, and all those kinds of things wrapped in one together.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Andrew from OnMessage.
Hi, Andrew Abdel Malik. Follow me on Twitter, Andrew AM. Quick plug. I work for OnMessage, a political consulting firm for Republicans. We work with campaigns and issue advocacy work. Previously, I've worked for, I move around a lot, so I'll go through this quick. The Bush-Cheney campaign in 2004, the Giuliani campaign, the Republican National Committee, and most recently Governor Rick Scott of Florida, his re-election campaign, and the Republican Party of Florida, where I was digital director this past cycle. So I'm the one Republican on the panel. Be kind, be gentle.
Thank you so much, guys. Well, why don't we start by talking a little bit about the evolution of civic engagement and politics on social networks. If 2008 was the year that we all realized the importance of social media, well, maybe not all of us, but the vast majority of us realized the importance and the influence it had on politics and the elections. 2012 then basically confirmed that motion. And then what's going on in this campaign, and how do you see social networks playing a role in 2016? Well, we're more than 400 days away from the campaign, but still we're in full swing for the primary. So if you can talk a little bit about that.
Okay, I'll go first. So I think one of the things that, and stop me if I start talking too long about this because I get really excited about the evolution. I started doing this, I had communications and fundraising background, but I actually really got into digital in 2005 when I started to work at Democratic headquarters. And Howard Dean in 2004 had sent this fundraising email out into the ether, and it started this idea that online could be part of politics. Seeing the complete evolution, 11 years later, has been fascinating, as now it's just mandatory for these candidates to really have a communication with folks in the way that they're actually communicating with themselves and with their friends. And I talked a little bit about this before the panel started with Enrique, just saying how, one of the things I think is really kind of interesting is that we used to sit on our front stoops and talk to our neighbors about politics and argue with them. face-to-face interaction. And now we're doing that on our digital front stoop, which is Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, and we're showing pictures and we're telling the same stories we would have told face-to-face, but we're keeping in touch with that friend from elementary school. And the power and the influence of that and the persuasion of that over voting and engagement has been, I think, revolutionary. I will say one thing that I think is all about 2016 is that in the prior years, people really did still see digital as a fundraising tool. They were like, okay, I get that I can reach out there and I can raise more money, which is an exciting thing for candidates, right? And it also doesn't require the candidate to get on the phone or go somewhere. They can do that with an email. And so it's a little bit easier for them. So I think that was a great change. What we're now seeing and what 16 is all about is that they now realize the power of it from field, from getting out the vote, the power of persuading people, of really using it in their advertising and really communicating to them at a different level. And I think that's where the turn is. I think it's just become more about calm than just money.
Andrew, would you agree with that? And also, can you talk a little bit about the fact that, yes, it makes fundraising easier for campaigns, and is that a good balance toward whatever is happening with, special interest groups and the super PACs and all of that?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, I agree. I think we're undergoing a huge shift in politics that, we really haven't seen before. Like, everyone now has a voice, right? Everyone can comment on Twitter. Everyone can post something on Facebook. And not that, everyone could say something before, but now it's to the masses, right? So that one random tweet criticizing a politician is now, content for BuzzFeed, right? And it becomes something larger than it is. And I think that's a very unique, interesting situation that we're now in, where 2-3 cycles ago, people's comments, people's reactions, the buzz on Twitter from a debate was not exactly a story, right? And I think there's a very fundamental shift as to how campaigns use this, how campaigns react, and how we adapt. For the most part, on the fundraising side, to answer your question, I think it's a good thing. You're talking definitely on email, digital fundraising, it's low dollar donors, right? It's a lot of people that are giving $5, $10, $15, and they're doing it consistently throughout a cycle. So I think it's a good thing. There's nothing inherently bad about it. Is there more money in politics that way? Maybe. But it's spread out amongst more people. I think the interesting part, though, is that people have constantly described the demise of email, and we were kind of talking about this earlier, where it's like, 10 years ago you maybe got 70% open rates, and today you're like, hey, I got 20. It's a good day, and maybe it fluctuates, right? But it's still, email is king for fundraising. And I think you're now seeing some new tools like Twitter introduced something yesterday. Campaigns can now, like a click to donate in your Twitter feed. That's very interesting. Facebook's working on some stuff. So there is a shift there.
Kenneth?
Sure, yeah. I think a lot of what Andrew's saying was resonating in terms of the way that in 2016, the breadth of social media and the popularity of social media and the number of users who are on social media and the many different avenues there are has become like a great equalizer in politics. And from my perspective, my candidate that I work for was relatively not as well known as our opponent. And so social media is a space where you can kind of take off even as an outsider or someone who doesn't already have the name recognition advantage. So social media is really a good equalizer in that sense, and I think that's more true for this election than ever before. And when you see candidates like Senator Sanders, who I work for, able to kind of take off on social media, that's just a good example of kind of how the equalizing influence of like the digital space. Yeah.
There was a question over here. Go ahead.
I wanted to know that this is a question for all of you. What is the highest, because I'm actually working right now with a politician, a commissioner over in Miami Beach. And, he wants me to help him with the campaign. He doesn't have anybody, so I thought I'd play campaign manager. Something better to ask. What is your go-to, so you guys are saying email. Is email the highest revenue
Well,
And the biggest bills at one time.
that's a very fair point. It does depend on the campaign and the size of the campaign. I mean, generally, still you're seeing about 33% coming from online revenue for the overall of what you're seeing. So it's obviously not the largest percent. I think that goes into several other buckets when you start, doing that. What we do find though is I actually do dual counting, if this makes sense, on all of our reports to our clients. And what I mean by that is what we find is that they've actually, think about how hyper-connected we all are. Like most of you are sitting here, you're on your phone, you're on your email, you're listening, you're doing a million different things, right? So in order to get that person's attention, you have to touch them in so many different ways. So it turns out you actually have to go to the event, and then you have to follow up with an email, then you have to call them, and then follow up with another email. And how do you count that money, right? So you don't. So I always say dual counting because I think what you'll find is it's an integral part of what a campaign should do. The same way that social is. It's like something you can't not have now.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think it really depends on your candidate. Email drives the vast majority of Senator Sanders' small contributions, and out of our fundraising, the digital space in general is probably 90+% of everything we do. So almost everything we do is online now, and email drives the vast majority of that.
Yeah, one of the things I think is important to keep in mind, especially in the email space too, and I don't know if you guys agree with me, but it can't be a one-off thing. I think there's sometimes, especially in smaller campaigns, congressional campaigns, smaller than that, there's a sense of like, well, I'm going to send out an email and I'm going to raise X amount of dollars. It's the end of the quarter, and it definitely cannot be that way. It has to be a consistent effort to grow your list, to offer something to your list, right? Just as we're all humans, if someone constantly comes up to you and says, hey, give me $10, give me $5, give me $20.16, right? At some point that becomes annoying, right? So you have to offer them something else too. And I think that's a very important part of the email fundraising component. It just can't be a one-off like, I need $10,000 this weekend, give me a dollar. I don't think it works that way.
Yeah. Sorry. I was just going to add that we like to use this word a lot, trusted source. You really have to be a trusted source. And I think that approach for social is really, it's the same way. Like you're giving them something, you're sharing an article, you're making them smarter, you're giving them good, cocktail conversation. So anything that you can do to have a conversation with them and interact with them, I think maybe that's something to the earlier question, and then I will stop babbling. But I'll say that Facebook and Twitter allow for a conversation with a candidate, and that brings them to the ground. And that's really what you're seeing now. Ever since the 2014 election, you're starting to see that they have to interact, they have to answer the questions. They can't manufacture content and give it to people. They have to actually be on the fly.
Yeah, the one that I'm actually representing, he got styrofoam banned from Miami Beach.
Yeah.
So, hopefully we're going to try to do it now for Miami and the whole thing, but he's doing something that makes people go, oh, wow, so yeah.
Interesting. If you have any questions, just raise your hand, and we'll be sure to ask our panelists. I also wanted to ask you about how digital platforms, social media are enhancing the political experience for voters. In television, we know now that our audience, this adds to our audience experience, right? So if you have a program like, let's say, the Super Bowl, people are on, tweeting or on Facebook posting different things. It makes it so much more, engaging. But that has introduced into better ratings for these shows. We've seen that also, or not necessarily. So in terms of politics, are more people getting involved, becoming more active in politics through social media engagement, or is that link hasn't still, been that proven?
To a degree, there's a couple points. I think the first is that, if you look over the last 10 cycles or 15 cycles or so 10, 20, 30 years, older people still vote more than younger people, and, we can now argue that there's, every young person is on Facebook or Snapchat or whatever, right? Like, everyone's connected to the internet, but there's still some things that are true, right? Older people still vote more than younger people. There's some things that still remain the same. I think what you're seeing now is just a greater exposure, right? Everyone is now more exposed to things. And so there's also a little bit of a danger to it in the political space, right? So the typical campaign is not, I mean, I don't know what your staff looks like, right? But you don't have 20 people in a digital department on your average campaign. Maybe a presidential campaign, definitely a presidential campaign. So maybe you have 40, 50, 60. Or if you're Hillary Clinton, you have 1,000, is what I hear, right? But like a congressional campaign has like one person, maybe two, a statewide race, maybe a few. You know, I worked on a statewide race last cycle, I had 9. That was a big number for a campaign. And there's so many platforms, right? And there's a little bit of a problem in the political space, I think, where there's like a shiny ball syndrome, right? It's like, ooh, Snapchat's the new thing. And actually a better example than that is Meerkat. When Meerkat launched a few months ago, it was going to be the game changer of 2016. How many people have Meerkat on their phone right now? 1, 2. Okay, so then you're gonna delete, right? But it was supposed to be the thing that changed 2016. Do you guys use Meerkat? No. So there is a little bit of a shiny ball syndrome, and things constantly come up. And I think, I mean, there's a lot of content to produce, right? So it's a very hard space to be in, and there's a lot of challenges. We're not big brands. We don't have a ton of money. It's a very, very different atmosphere in the political space.
So, can I? You want to talk a little bit about how you guys have seen this growing engagement or not?
Yeah, I think more than maybe any other candidate in the 2016 race, we're really energizing a lot of young people. So the people who Andrew says don't vote, maybe they will this time. I hope so. So we're energizing a lot of young people, and that's driven a lot by what's going on social media. And I think...
Do you see it transforming into votes?
Yeah. Yeah, I certainly hope so. I think everybody agrees that President Obama was able to effectively communicate his message online, and it galvanized a lot of support within the younger communities. And what you saw is that young people did actually turn out to vote in 2008, although less so. Yeah, a lot of it is the candidate. The message is what really matters at the end of the day. But yeah, I think it can absolutely drive more engagement, and we're hearing from a lot of our first-time donors or people just liking our Facebook page or following us on Twitter that this is the first time that they've taken some sort of political step. And we're organizing people online now to run distributed events all over the country. And for many of them, this is the first time they've ever done anything political. And so, you know, it's starting online and moving people into doing real offline actions. And I'm pretty confident that those kinds of people are going to end up voting.
Well, I think one thing on the flip side of what you said, which I think is important to mention, is that Facebook will tell you their fastest growing population online right now is actually 65 plus. So these folks are coming online, and we're having to find ways to communicate with them because that's where they are now. Maybe because the youth has moved on to Snapchat or whatever it is. But I think that's an important thing. I also think the second screen phenomenon that we were talking about before, like you're watching TV, and so like an political ad, which used to be the most powerful thing to change your mind, also could go out there. If you think about it, if it was just a TV ad and they said something, you almost accepted it as truth because somebody said it. But now you're sitting there in front of your computer, or you're on Twitter and you're outraged about the ad, or you want to find out if that's true, and you actually go and look up that information. I think that's what changes the dynamics more than anything, is the rapid response of it. Like you're suddenly able to like counteract that, and then you're able to go tell all your friends that that's bull. S-H-I-T. You know, and I think we see that with the GOP debate the other night. Like, if, you know, and with all the presidential debates as we start going through this, you'll see that when somebody makes a claim, they can't just get away with it now because they've got all of these people holding them accountable. And it's kind of fascinating if you think about it. So for from the campaign side, they rely on consultants like us to suddenly say, like, how do I respond to that? So Bernie Sanders at the presidential level is able to harness that energy and to getting out his message. But you also have to think about the flip side of that, which is like, how do we take back and rapid response and counteract and set the record straight? A lot of this is about correcting the record, I think, as well.
I would just add to that, kind of one of the great things about social media is how close it makes your candidate to the voters. And so during the debate the other night, my boss just live tweeted the whole thing. And if you were watching what he was putting out online, kind of felt like you were sitting in the room with him, like hearing his thoughts about the debate. And it's a good way to, in a moment where all of your potential opponents are kind of on stage and you know, receiving millions of viewers, you can kind of control the message yourself online.
So, you know, we have another dimension of a question over there. Sure.
I want to know where there's a disconnect or there's a disparity maybe at different campaign levels. Because on the one hand, for example, last year we heard testimony like some of these political campaigns are actually leading to Facebook to see how they can play a part in the algorithms and, you know, do their behind the scenes thing, whatever that is, you know, to get to me, to get to her. And then I'm hearing from you that some of these campaigns have like one or two people on the social media team. And we may not, you know, there's a lot of people on here that, so I don't know how you really end up going and getting platforms. So what's going on? Is it that presidential campaigns are very sophisticated and everybody else doesn't get it, or?
Good?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Think of it as a Fortune 100 company versus the small business down the street, right? I mean, presidential campaigns have the resources, have some more time. Well, depends who you ask on the time component, right? But they do have infinitely more resources compared to a congressional campaign. Now, at the same time, do congressional campaigns have relationships with Facebook or Twitter? Absolutely, right? You know, I have my contacts there and we work on different projects and things that might come up. And you're constantly learning. I mean, this is constantly changing, right? What was true on Facebook 12 months ago is not going to be true on Facebook, whatever, 400 some days from now when the election happens. So there is a wild difference in sophistication. I think you have to remember that there are, 435 congressmen, like how many of them have a competitive race in any given year, right? Most of them don't have to do a lot of the things that we're talking about. And that's even less so on, I think, a local level, right? So at the same time, though, I mean, I'll pass it to someone who's on a presidential campaign. But there's a lot of lessons we can learn in presidential cycles that I think kind of roll downhill, if you will. There's a lot of more testing, and even something we haven't mentioned are committees, right? The DNC, the RNC, they are institutions, right? They're not going to go away on the first Wednesday in November, right? So they have the ability to build even longer term, right? So there are some huge distinct differences, I think, as you go down the ballot.
Yeah, I've found companies like Facebook and Twitter are very accessible, not just to big campaigns, but even starting out as a smaller campaign. They make themselves very accessible because they want you using their platform. And while they're probably not going to change their algorithm to suit your needs, they'll definitely give you tips and tricks. But really, it's not all that complicated. And what you'll hear from them when you actually do meet with someone from Facebook is kind of pretty obvious. It's just like, oh yeah, if you put out good content on the internet, people will respond to good content. So that's pretty much the mantra that we hear from Facebook and Twitter and representatives from all the social media companies out there is put out good content and your users will respond to it as much as you can do so, be an authentic voice or translate authentically the voice of your candidate or your committee to the users online. And I think that's something that's apparent with or without meeting with Facebook, and any candidate or campaign can kind of learn from that.
Yeah, and I'll say I have, when I started my firm 4 years ago, the reason I did was because there was only a few digital consulting firms, and they were all kind of taking the same presidential level or Senate statewide level approach to digital, and they were like charging people $1 gazillion to do it, and good for their pocketbooks, but not really good for for spreading digital to every level of campaign. So we started it to be able to say, look, you have to take it uniquely, and you have to figure out what works for a congressional, what works for a statewide, what's the best setup for all these different levels. And so there really are ideal setups for all these different scenarios of what you're using. Presidential years spill over innovation, mostly on the infrastructure side. So like we'll see things like advances in data, advances in the tool sets that we're using, because those companies know there's more money being spent, so they'll put more into R&D into those tools, which is great because the next few years after that it will sprinkle on. I think the biggest thing though that like we always say, I do these trainings across the country, and my first slide, which I'll change as after this election, says your candidate is not Barack Obama. And the reason why I say that is because everybody was trying to take all the lessons of Barack Obama. Really, I love Barack Obama and I love their team, but they're holding their hands steady while the money fell from the sky. It's presidential level is about people going and searching for Bernie Sanders to give him money because they're excited about him. And so they're not having to really raise it. They're trying to give you easy ways to use it. When you're a congressman, and the reason why I use the "you're not Barack Obama" example is because Barack, you remember, had the dinner with Barack, right? And then these congressmen or different people at different levels are like, oh yeah, you can win a lunch with me. But winning a lunch with you is not the same as winning a lunch with Barack Obama. And my joke always is Barack Obama had to add Michael Jordan and Michelle in at the end. And like, you know, they were like, oh, and Michael Jordan will be there. I'm like, if you have to add in Michael Jordan, like, you know, they're really not going to meet with you, Mr. Congressman, as much as I love you. So it's just something to remember that what we learn from the presidential is not necessarily about using the same tactics, because it's a different kind of give and take. It's more about the infrastructure and the innovation from that.
I have a question, and then we'll go back to the audience. I wanted to ask you, you know, in your consulting and now as a digital director for a campaign, how much do you let the candidate's voice become part of, you know, what they're doing online? And what I mean by this is that, okay, maybe you have a Barack Obama that can, you know, inspire people or just, you know, engage young communities or minorities. Maybe you have a Donald Trump who's very good at, you know, trolling people on Twitter, and he's been very successful with that. He has a huge following. I'm not judging. I'm just saying that's, you know, that's what he does. How much do you let the candidate's voice be part of or central component of what you do online?
I would say as much as possible for me. It depends on your candidate, I guess. But for my candidates, you know, as often as I can steal time from, you know, the most valuable thing in a campaign is the candidate's time, and as much as I can steal his time to be responding to people directly on social media or actually writing an email, that's something that I think really excites the people who want to hear from him. And, you know, people follow at Bernie Sanders on Twitter, or they follow, you know, Donald Trump on Twitter because they want to hear from that individual, not their staff necessarily. And the reason that Donald Trump, totally independently of his ideas or lack thereof, is popular on Twitter is that you really feel like you have stream of consciousness Donald Trump, and you feel like you are in the room with that person, and you feel like you're getting their thoughts. And so that's as much as possible, as much as you can get your candidate to participate in the digital process, I say go for it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, if a candidate's willing to do it, have at it. At the same time, not every candidate's willing to do it. And just as all of us in here, some people are better on Twitter and some people are better on Instagram or whatever it might be. I think one of the most important things for a campaign to realize, though, is that if the candidate's not tweeting, don't try and be the candidate, right? It can't be some staffer in the corner cube who's like, I think he'd say this. That just don't try and fake it. It's either the campaign and staff tweeting something, or it's the candidate, right? I don't think like, don't try and fake it. That's just trouble. But you know, it's all comfort level. It's what people want to do.
Question over here.
By the way, you meant like so to phrase it like second person.
Yeah.
Like so and so thinks this, even though it's not necessarily. When it comes to political content, whether it's for fundraising, conversations, or just general candidate brand recognition, which tool, like which social media site do you find is the best when it comes to organic
The most bang for your buck is Facebook, I think. Yeah, and I'll tell you why. So we build custom audiences that way. So a couple things happen with emails. You have a lot of inactive email addresses, abandoned addresses. They used to always be really attached to their Yahoo email address. They abandoned it and started using Gmail, but you still only have their Yahoo. So I can actually upload a list of inactive email addresses and start targeting them, because many times that inactive email address is attached to their Facebook account. When Facebook was open 10 years ago, they were using Yahoo, or I guess it's 11 years now. So the idea behind it is that you're actually able to target those folks and re-engage them. So those reactivation ads for me makes a dead email address, which would have been useless, actually have a new life. So I think that's probably the biggest return on investment I can think of, as well as the fact just the micro-targeting on the Facebook audiences is really, really good for that. Organically, I think it depends on what you're trying to approach, but most of the time, I mean, we work with Senator Booker, and he's like a Twitter king, as we all know. So Twitter, I think you usually do get the most organic because it's the simplest, lowest bar ask you're asking someone to do. They just have to hit retweet and they're done. And you can get your message really far out. So I would have to say Twitter, I think.
What about for your campaign?
I would say for the Bernie Sanders campaign, if we're stuck on a desert island and we get one social media network for both paid and organic, I think Facebook drives the most for us in terms of our paid ads on Facebook and the way we're able to target the users that we want to see our ads, and also on the organic side, just the popularity of Facebook makes it a winning platform for us.
Actually, probably a little bit of a longer answer, but
Meerkat?
Meerkat, all Meerkat.
All the time.
I think
Keep going with that philosophy. We like it.
All Meerkat. I think it actually entirely depends on what the goal is, and that's a huge component. If it's collecting email addresses, sure, it's Facebook. If it's something else, I think there are too many options right now. For example, if I'm running a congressional race in Miami, the Miami DMA is very expensive on TV, right? So maybe the most bang for my buck is to run pre-roll on Hulu or whatever, on Hulu or something like that, right? It depends what my actual goal is, right? If it's just social, probably Facebook and Facebook. But I think, again, it has to be what your goal is and what you're actually trying to accomplish. If it's awareness or if it's GOTV time, maybe it's Twitter. I think it's a little bit hard to kind of pin down. I think the other thing I would say is that oftentimes, at least on the Republican side, I can say this, I don't know about the Ds, but too many people go, I want to do this on Facebook, or I need to find these people on Facebook, or these people on Twitter. I think that's entirely the wrong approach. You have to go, you have a voter file, right? So we have that strategic advantage. We know who's registered to vote, for example. You need to go out and find those people regardless of where they are, right? Maybe they overconsume on Facebook, maybe they overconsume on CNN.com, right? And maybe it's pre-roll, mid-roll, whatever, right? But you have to go out and find those people wherever they are, as opposed to going, I'm going on Facebook and then I'm going to find who I'm looking for. Or I'm going on Snapchat and I'm going to find 18 to 24-year-olds. It's the wrong approach. You have to start with who you're looking for.
We had a question over there. Go ahead.
Yes, so the Hispanic vote. So some candidates in B2 is finding less effective to attract Hispanics and others. But other than the reactions to the Trump shenanigans, do you see any differences between Hispanics and non-Hispanics as it relates to their engagement with social media corporate activities?
Yeah, I'm happy to take this. I worked on the governor's race here in Florida last cycle, and we had a very aggressive advertising plan. One of the biggest things I learned was really, it was foolish in a state like Florida, for example. It's foolish to say we're going to target Hispanics, right? There are Cubans, there are Puerto Ricans, there's multiple groups inside that, right? And being a little too broad is a bad thing, okay? That was one of the things I learned. The other thing I learned, and we did this with Facebook, is that people could be English dominant, they could be Spanish dominant, we could run bilingual. Like that was a big, that's a big learning thing for us. And I think oftentimes it was like, you go back 2 cycles, right, in 2012 or 2010, and people would go, well, advertise to Hispanics, it has to be Spanish. That's not necessarily the case, right? And quite frankly, it was just foolish. So, I think we learned a lot in Florida this past cycle. It was really effective. Governor Scott did really well in that area. So there's still a lot of work to do, I think, on getting a little bit better at that. So that's my perspective.
I'll just add one thing. I actually highly recommend going on Facebook's site if you've ever been on like their business side to look at some of their advertising stuff. They have some really interesting case studies about exactly what you're talking about, whether you're Spanish dominant, whether you're English but identify as Hispanic. And it talks all about, and they have different advertising that's targeted to these different subgroups and how their algorithm, as Big Brother scary, right? But how their algorithm knows whether or not you're English dominant but Hispanic identified, or if you are Spanish speaking Hispanic, and so it goes through all this thing. It's kind of interesting, and they have some really good case studies. I think it's a really valuable lesson. It doesn't just go obviously for the Hispanic community. It's in general when you're talking about language or how you're going to appeal to a certain constituency. But it is interesting because I think the one thing that digital has changed for everybody is that you are so micro targeted that you actually do have to really tailor your message and make sure that you're not just, falling on deaf ears because you're really not approaching it in the right way.
I think I would add that maybe on the other side of this argument, because I don't think language is that important to Hispanic voters. They're more interested about the issues and the policies. So if any given candidate, is willing to address the issues that are affecting the Hispanic community, I know it's not a monolithic community, but things like education, healthcare, the economy, unemployment is higher for the Latino population, that is, and then of course immigration, which is a personal issue. I think that once candidates address that in a way that speaks to the needs of the community, it doesn't really matter if they do it in Spanish or in English. Ultimately, they'll respond to the issue and to specific policies. I don't know, Kenneth, and then Andrew, if you want to go ahead and.
Sure, yeah, I think that's right. I don't know that we necessarily alter what we're doing on social media to reach Hispanic voters so much as we develop policies and put out ideas that are right for the diverse Hispanic community. And so as much as we can advertise kind of what our policies and prescriptions are for the country with regards to the issues that Hispanic people care about, the economy, education, creating jobs, raising wages, immigration, and as long as we can do that effectively in any way on Facebook or Twitter or wherever, it doesn't really matter. It's just, it really does come back to those policies. So.
Go ahead. That's actually a great question, because I think that with Barack Obama's success on social media, people concentrated on that strategy and they didn't realize that what was huge about it was the use of data, right? Big data in that campaign. So if you want to comment on that question.
Yeah, I think what it gets to, one of your biggest jobs as a digital staffer is not just to be kind of always pushing out content, but really listening to what your users are saying. And the greatest amount of data that we have on the campaign comes from our users telling us kind of what they believe and what they think, and like what motivates their vote. And so we're analyzing that data either just by reading it or by using machine learning techniques or by analyzing kind of what worked well and what didn't work well. And so we're always kind of trying to respond to that data and to feed it over to the people who are responsible for working on policy and communications and those things, and to say, look, like this is what our users are saying, this is what America is saying, this is what people in Florida are saying, and you, as a digital staffer, you're not just responsible for putting the message out, you're responsible for taking in what people are saying and giving that to the rest of the campaign. So.
Yeah, I won't comment so much on the messaging component for data, but I think something that kind of gets muddied a lot, especially in the political space, is that like I was digital director, but there's a data geek too, and I'm not that person, right? There are people that are, they understand big data. It's a huge component to what they do, and we help provide more information to that data. And likewise, they give us a lot of data so we can do things like list matching and targeting and so on and so forth. One of the things you mentioned though, like sort of the micro-targeting thing, it's very, very easy to run down like a rabbit hole of, there are 350 people who have this really unique mix of issues that they care about. Well, that's just not scalable, right? I mean, you guys pump out a lot of content, like I pumped out a lot of content last cycle. To some point, it has to be scalable, right? Yes, influencing 300 votes here or there can make a difference, right? But there has to be a universe size, a target audience size that's large enough that you can actually create content for. Because I don't care how many graphic designers you have, how many video editors you have, there's never enough, right? Every person in this room has a very unique mix of issues that they care about. And we might all agree on jobs or the economy, like very broad issues. So that's probably a little too broad, but at the same time, like, caring about transportation issues, who's a mom, who's over 35, and lives in this, it's a rabbit hole you can run down, but your content could never keep up with it because there are too many small segments. At least that's my opinion, I don't know.
I think that's somewhat true, and I agree with you, and it is a very danger that you end up spending so much money to match like against a voter file to find one person sitting on their couch as opposed to spending money to get your message out to a wider audience. I think the one flip side of it though, the one piece of it that I think we're still seeing people do is when we talk about large constituencies or communities we're trying to reach. So you just brought up the Hispanic community because maybe you're really strong on an issue they care about, but you need to get that message out to them and let them know your position. So a lot of times the flip side of that is like, for example, we did this in a gubernatorial race very effectively where we needed to get out that someone was against teachers. And so we really wanted to find those teachers. And so we found and targeted them online with this message. I think that can be the same with whatever constituency it is that you identify yourself with. I'm using a couple of different examples there. So those are ones where that's a very specific piece. The data didn't drive you to be interested in teachers. It was that you knew that this was an issue in the race and you knew teachers would be angry if they found out what this person had done. So I think that's the flip side of it. I don't think it drives your policies. I don't think it drives your policies with the Hispanic community. I don't think it drives your policies with women. This happens a lot with women too, right? But what it does is it knows, and you might be able to effectively know that that's going to persuade these people to take action to vote against them or to vote for you. And so you're going to want to reach them where they are. And that's where data points you as to when you need to go to that specific group.
Talking about data, out of the immense amount of percentages and numbers and everything you've seen about social networks, digital platforms, politics, civic engagement, can you pick one that really gets you excited about what's going on in this world? I mean, something that really strikes as a potential for where this thing is moving towards in the future. I don't know if it's the number of people that are getting involved in by following a candidate on Twitter or by donating money on Facebook. Like one number or a couple of numbers that you think are really special, I guess.
Sure, yeah. I think two of the most exciting things on the Sanders campaign so far, in terms of just like the numbers and kind of those phenomenon that really excite you, is one, we held a distributed event, day of action, where people came together all around the country, and we were able to really knock our own socks off by getting 3,700 plus events all around the country, with 105,000 people coming out together just to watch a live stream of the senator and to like meet other supporters in their area. And so that was really exciting, is seeing how many people are really willing to do something offline. And sometimes it sounds like a lot to ask. Hey, I know you're receiving this message online, but would you actually take a step out of your door and go to a stranger's house who you don't know and engage with them and talk with them? It seems like a big ask, but people are really willing to do it, and that was one thing that really excited me. And the second thing has to be the way in which, specifically on our campaign, we're driving an unprecedented amount of small donors to contribute to our campaign, and the kind of the power dynamics there between, obviously we're in an age where big money is increasingly influential and increasingly prevalent in politics. And when you see, Jeb Bush raising $100 million or something, that's kind of like a really scary thing politically for me. And so the extent to which we've been able to mobilize small donors and have, our average contribution be somewhere around $30, but still be receiving hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of small contributions, that's another thing that really excites me.
I think the gold standard, at least on the digital side, is like turning online action to offline action. I mean, the biggest thing for us at the end of the day, probably two things, right? Like, can you raise money online? Probably, and will you actually go and vote, right? Like, you have to get up, leave your house, and actually go do something. And I look back on last cycle. One of the things I was most pleased with was, in the state of Florida, you can actually, absentee ballot and early voting is a very big part of voting in Florida. And we did a lot of social, a lot of ads to drive people to either request an absentee ballot online, find out where they can go early vote. We had about 220,000 people do that, compared to our opponent, who had 20,000 people who did that. In a race that's decided by 1%, that makes a huge difference. So I was really pleased that you can actually see people taking offline action for something that's kind of hard to do, right? Like, you need to go to a very specific place on a specific day between a specific time. Like, it's not the easiest thing in the world, and I think I was most pleased that we're just able to do that in ways that haven't been done before. And I think looking at 16, at least on the Republican side, I am beyond pleased with the level of sophistication and the seriousness we have. I know it's not a specific tool or tactic, but you have to understand that 4 years ago, we were in a completely different place than where we are right now. And I think something that was kind of mentioned here very briefly earlier is that, no one's the Barack Obama anymore. And what Barack Obama did in 2008 or 2012 is not necessarily relevant anymore. Not to say that none of it's relevant, but there's a lot that has changed. Things have gotten more sophisticated. There's better targeting. There's better ad options. There's so many other things. And I think just the sophistication, the seriousness that campaigns and committees have taken on both sides of the aisle is really promising for 16 and beyond.
Yeah, it's funny. I literally was going to say the number of small dollar donations is what's been, and then I thought, well, but also getting people. I was like, wait, they took both my answers. So I'm going to go with 82% of statistics are lies. So I don't have a number for you. How's that?
I was going to say the huge TV audiences for the debates, and I think that's directly linked to the online experience.
Yeah.
And for both debates, the one on Fox News and the other one on CNN, I think that it's directly linked to that. We're going to take one more question over here, and then one or two more questions from the audience, and then we'll close it out. Go ahead.
All right. short videos, funny stuff. You guys can be perceived, or the crazy management is perceived as boring. How do you manage that, like, dual communication?
Debates can be boring, you're saying?
Well, oh, go ahead.
Well, I think one of the first things on social is like everyone look at the home page of your phone, like take out your iPhone, Android, whatever. All the apps probably either do like a function, like telling you the weather or maps or something. They're entertainment or they're social, right? And I think that's where you have to be in the social space, at least in politics. I don't know if these folks agree with me, but you have to entertain people. You have to be social. You have to respond. You were talking about memes or like short videos and stuff. I don't think that's just for young people. I think that's for everybody. I mean, if you look at, you have to recognize that people aren't consuming content on your Facebook page, for example. They're consuming it in the news feed, right? So there are things like, I just got engaged, for example. Like,
Congratulations.
Thank you. But like, I post a picture like that, and a campaign is competing with like me and my fiance versus like a debate clip, right? Well, I'm better than the debate clip, right? So I think that's important to recognize that like, you have to compete, you have to be social, you have to be entertaining, you have to respond and talk to people, and that's a huge part of it. Where like, I think that's regardless of age, right? My mom loves puppy pictures just as much as anything else. So you have to be unique. At the same time, I think it's important to recognize that we often talk about really serious issues that change people's lives, and you can't dumb them down too much. You can make content better and easier to consume and more interesting, but it doesn't mean it has to be stupid or silly or just plain out ridiculous. Because
Unless you're Donald Trump, then
it depends on who you are. I don't work for him. So.
Well, I think you also have to be authentic and unique. So, for example, video is the hottest thing on Facebook right now. They'll tell you that's the most viewed, right? But if you're a boring person who's doing a 2-minute like video about how you feel about a specific issue, you're not going to resonate, and you're not going to resonate with youth, and you're not going to resonate with anyone, because they want to be watching, the puppies. Or whatever the other thing. I used to tell people when they do emails and we do fundraising, they would be like, oh, come watch our ad, and then go back and donate. And I would be like, yeah, if you sent them to YouTube, they're watching a cat play the piano 5 seconds into your ad, and they're not coming back because it's way more entertaining. And the same goes for Facebook or any of the else. Like the competition, even the competition in your inbox is so much that they're offering you something. You've got to, this goes back to our earlier point, you've always got to be offering them something that they actually will like, and that's a trusted source. I told you I'd come back to that saying.
I don't know about that though. I mean, yeah, that's very interesting, because that was one of the questions that I had for them, and I told them from the beginning, how much does your following influence your way of thinking, or it just confirms it? I mean, are you just preaching to the choir all the time, or being part of that choir because of your following? Do you follow people like Ann Coulter, for example, if you work for Univision? Do you follow people like Jorge Ramos if you're someone at Fox News and not really interested about Spanish language television or Hispanic issues? I mean, your experience on that?
I think we use social from a consultant perspective. We use social to try to find people who are like our donors, so I can get more people to give. I'm using it to influence them to be outraged enough to give. I'm influencing them to. So yes, I am, from my digital consultancy, when I'm trying to use fundraising as the core advocacy, I'm trying to preach to the choir. In fact, I'm trying to find more people to join my choir so that they can be preaching it with me. But that's a different goal. So when the goal is message and persuading them, that's a different story. I do think most people have some semblance of different viewpoints in their life, and I do think that even though they may not like your post, or they may not say, sometimes it's going back to that correct the record. So my very Republican aunt in Kansas, might see something where I say, you know what, that actually was a false claim, and I prove something, and she's not going to like that, but you know what, she's going to realize when she maybe even clicked on the article that she was like, oh, that wasn't true. I'm not going to go post that on my wall. So, the influence that you have in persuasion is quite powerful, but many times it's silent because there are a lot of people who, just like it's not polite at a cocktail party to talk politics and religion, they're not going to do it on their Facebook wall or to do it on yours.
Because I have noticed, for example, like I'll look at something and there's like an organic reach that people have clicked on it.
Absolutely.
But then they haven't retweeted it, they haven't liked it, they haven't done anything.
They wanted to not share with their boss and whoever else is on their feed.
It's important to look at the right metrics too. Like, do you want 10,000 likes on something, on a video on Facebook, but maybe, 90% watched the first 3 seconds and then it died? I'd rather take 10 likes and then everybody watch the whole thing, right? So it depends what your goal is, what you're trying to accomplish, and looking at the right metrics. Like, I think oftentimes it's like really easy to fall into like vanity metric world where it's like, it's likes and followers and like retweets. Sure, they're nice, but I want more people to read the article, let's say, or something like that.
And I think Twitter now measures that, if I remember correctly, that it's more about how many people are actually clicking on the tweet than just retweeting it.
Yeah, it's our engagement rate. That's why.
Okay.
I would just add to both of those questions, never be afraid to try something out that you may surprise yourself. A few weeks ago, my boss really wanted to send out this incredibly long letter over email, and there's a general rule that you should keep emails very short, and people don't want to sit in their inbox for 6 minutes reading an email or whatever, reading a single email, and he insisted on doing it, so we said, all right, we'll do it, we'll put it out, and so we put out I think it was 2,800 words or something. It was an incredibly long essay on kind of all of the major issues of our time, and I was shocked to see that people actually engaged with it more than an average email, and people will surprise you if you test out new things, and the same goes for young people. As a young person myself, we're testing out things all the time, and it turns out that a lot of young people do want to respond to serious issues, and a lot of young people aren't going to be convinced or persuaded to vote for you based off of a funny GIF or a video or something like that. And I think I've surprised myself by the extent to which people are willing to interact with serious content.
And I do see an evolution in the metrics. It's not about the likes, like you say, or the following. It's more about the engagement. And just a quick example, Jorge Ramos has been doing journalism for over 30 years at Univision, and he's never had an incident go as viral as his interview or his attempt to interview Donald Trump. Yeah. Does that, make him more or less relevant because he went viral once? Or is it the 30 years behind in terms of experience and work that really, give him a place as an influencer? So go ahead.
So that's true. I'm not talking about the official parties. I'm talking about the candidates from that party. And then another question. Is there ever going to be a day when we're going to go on Facebook?
Vote for?
That was actually my last question. I was going to say, this time around, we had the first candidate who announced their run for president on YouTube. It was, I think, Twitter and YouTube, which was Hillary Clinton. Will we ever have voting online? But just go ahead.
To answer the first question, clearly I think the Democrats are doing better. All under my guidance. No. I will say, in all seriousness, we actually work with Governor Kate Brown, who had the motor voter law this year. It's something I am so passionate about personally. I really want to see voting more accessible. I think it's awful that I have several members of Congress we work for that have introduced bills where make it a different day of the week. A Tuesday. It's just as impossible as you could possibly think for most people. So I do hope we see more of that. I think what you are seeing, whether we'll see it on Facebook on that particular platform, who knows? But you got to find ways to meet people where they are, and they're not going to an elementary school at 7 a.m. on a Tuesday morning anymore, and so they've got to find new ways. And early voting is starting to happen. Some of these other ways of doing it, but Oregon and Washington both do all vote by mail, which I think is also like almost there, but not quite what we're all looking for. But again, there's work being done.
I think it's, for me, Democrats are just dominating online in terms of like how they're using social media or email or their websites and more broadly in the digital space. And I think an interesting study a couple of months ago, someone studied out of all the 2016 candidates how many of their emails were going to people's spam boxes, and virtually all of the Republicans had below 50% of their emails were actually getting to people's inboxes. And it's because for such a long time they've abused their readers by sending them kind of churn and burn donation asks, and they don't they're not offering something to their viewers in terms of the policies and the issues that those viewers decided to subscribe to their list for. And so I think in terms of strategy, that's just an example of how the Democrats have done something in the past a lot better than the Republicans, just from a tactical perspective. And as for online voting, I think the internet is becoming more and more ubiquitous, and you'll see the internet becoming not just one thing. It's not a place that you go, and it's not a phone that you pull out, and it's not a computer that you log on to. I think the internet is going to be increasingly involved in everything we do in life, and that means when you get into your car is connected to the internet. That means that soon enough it's not just your watch that's connected to the internet, but your actual body that's connected to the internet or something like that. And so as the internet becomes more and more ubiquitous, I think there's no question that voting will be done online in some way.
So I'll take a political answer. I'll say I think Democrats do really well in talking to their main audience. I think Republicans do really well talking to their audience. I mean, you have to recognize they're Republicans and Democrats, and people react and respond differently to different things. I mean, the DCCC burns their list, but they raise a lot of money doing it, right? So, okay, maybe you know something I don't. We can talk later.
Okay, I ran their program. I did leave, so the volume has gotten increased, but I did build their program, and they raised $70 million online last year. So that's worth it. It made sense. They did. Yeah. No, they did, and they revolutionized a lot of things. But it works for them, just like it does for Bernie Sanders or a presidential. It doesn't work for everybody, so it's not a replicable skill.
Exactly. And I think one of the things to recognize most, and we kind of mentioned this earlier, Barack Obama did an amazing job in 2008 and 12, but that same strategy was applied last cycle, for example. There were, OFA staff people that worked on the presidential tried to apply the same thing on statewide races or congressional races, and it didn't work. I mean, Republicans won, right? So there's an ebb and flow. Things go well for one side and they come back to the other. But I think as far as Republicans go, I think we've made huge strides. I think, I definitely respect my opponents on the other side and understand that, it is a battle to see who can do better and test and test and invest, right? And constantly work to get better. So maybe a little political of an answer, but I think both sides are doing well, and I'm really happy with where Republicans are. With respect to the voting online thing, I mean, I was one of the, 24 million people that had their information hacked from OPM. So I got a nice letter, and I now have free credit monitoring for a year, so thanks. But and there are ballot security issues in a lot of different states and stuff, but until we can actually say things are secure, I mean, if the federal government gets hacked, forget Hillary Clinton's email servers, you're welcome. Things like that can get hacked, but DOD and huge cybersecurity issues, I think we are a long ways from that. Maybe it happens in my lifetime, maybe it doesn't. But having been one of those people whose information was hacked from the federal government, I think there are huge cybersecurity concerns.
And going back to the metrics, according to the latest Pew Research on this issue. Both Republicans and Democrats have a similar presence on social networks, but Democrats do make more donations online than Republicans. So it depends on the metric and how you want to see it. So I'll give you guys an opportunity to close this out. Any closing statements or anecdotes or whatever you want to share with us. And of course, thank you for making the trip down to Miami, for being here today. I know it's a very tough spot when you have to close out a very successful week. And like I said at the beginning, when you're the only thing standing between happy hour and what's next. So go ahead, Karen.
I just say thank you for having me. I think this was a great discussion, and hopefully you all got something out of it as well. I know I did. I would say the biggest thing I would have you take away is something somebody said earlier. I think there's so much to be learned from an innovation perspective. This cycle, as we've got we've got a really crowded GOP field, but it means there's 12 different people trying to innovate, 12 different people at the presidential level who have money and resources to try to figure out what works and what doesn't. There's a lot to learn from that, and I think that's a really exciting time. I think you even now have a primary with multiple people on the Democratic side, which is a real race, and we're seeing really cool innovation happening on that side as well. So I think it's like, this is the year of learning, and we all are smart enough now to know that we can't just apply the presidential to the smaller races, but there's still things that we can learn and read. So I think, the more you are on social, the more you're going to be able to figure out how to apply it to politics.
Yeah, I don't know if I have any bright closing remarks, but thank you so much for hosting and giving me an opportunity to come to Miami, and thank you to you two as well, and enjoyed learning from you.
Obviously, thank you to Univision and yourself and everyone for putting this on. I'm really excited for the future. I think there's a lot of great things happening in the digital space and in politics. So thank you to you guys as well, and thank you.
Taryn, Kenneth, Andrew, thank you so much, and thanks to everyone here. Hope you have a wonderful weekend.